Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I am Priya, and today I just want to dive in to talking about listening. Now, I've done other episodes where I am discussing triggers, per se, right? And what triggers are all about. And I had some pretty intense triggers these past couple of days because of the topic of listening. And so today I wanted to really talk about what is active listening and are people even listening anymore, or are people just listening so that they can respond? I am a speech pathologist, and one of the reasons that I went into speech is because I love communication. I just love understanding how the dynamics in communication, why two people would want to talk, what they talk about, how they talk, all the different, cultural components of a conversation. I'm fascinated by it. Now, that being said, I am not the expert in the having the best communication, or rather, I haven't always been the best at communication. I would often say, yes, I'm, a communication expert, but my communication sucked just because I had these adaptive, maladaptive patterns that I had developed over my lifetime from childhood until now, just learned behaviors and ways of interacting that just weren't healthy when it came down to communication. Now, the reason that this episode is coming up today, and just that I felt this urgency to talk about this, is I've had two interactions with people that really brought the idea of active listening to the surface for me. One person, new person that I met at the gym, where we're working out, and the person was, I'm not even going to details, sharing their story about their health journey and how they're showing up, how they're trying to help others who have been in a similar position as them. And I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. There's something that's kind of parallel to what I do with my coaching and somatic healing and just spiritual healing. And I just, even though that person was talking, I just allowed them to talk. But in my mind, I was thinking, wow, yeah, this is really cool. Like somebody else is doing this kind of work. And there was a pause. That was the end of the conversation. So I felt, okay, it was a good time for me to say, oh, but by the way, guess what? I'm a coach as well, and this is what I do. And the person came over to me, listened to me, and immediately it was like I hadn't said anything and said, oh, yeah. This is what I do. I help people, and continued for another 10 minutes in the middle of my workout, mind you, to talk about themselves. And now, this is how I know I've worked really hard, because just a few years ago, I would have been so triggered by this. I'd just been like quick to label, oh my God, what a narcissist, just talking about himself all the time, or herself. And this time it was more, I was an observer. I'm often saying to my clients, be the observer, be the witness. It's almost like you're looking at yourself in the movie, but just allow yourself to watch it. So I was able in that moment to watch the movie and say, wow, this is interesting. Here we have been in a conversation for 10 to 15 minutes. This person hasn't heard a word I said. And meanwhile, here I'm trying to share, and nope, they didn't want to hear. But why did this person approach me to have this conversation? Was it that they needed to be heard? What was it in that dynamic? And that just really brought, just in communication, in listening, to understand what it is and how important it is when in communication to build relationships and to solve problems and create understanding. It is, we see in society today, wherever you are in the world, politics, anything, how, one side is maybe communicating, the other side is communicating, and they're not communicating the same thing, and they're butting heads, and there's arguments. And we need to figure out a way to actually create more understanding and actually become more active in our listening. People listen. One thing that I've come to understand, and I don't want to say that this is everyone, but just in my daily dynamics, and now I'm also responsible for the energy that I'm giving off. But people recently, I found that people listen to respond, not to understand. In my dynamics with other people, I've found that I would share something and something so vulnerable, and I would be emotionally vulnerable, thinking that I was going to get, oh, I'm sorry, Priya, or yeah, wow, that must be so tough. And meanwhile, then it was flipped to talk about them. Well, when this happened to me, this is what I did. And then it became about them. And meanwhile, I wasn't getting the support that I needed. Does that resonate with you? Has that ever happened to you, that you are trying to share something and then meanwhile the conversation is freaking hijacked from you? Yeah. People listen to respond and not to understand. When was the last time you had a conversation and you just were quiet? You just were quiet and you listened and you said, yeah, wow. You gave sounds and words of feedback that you're listening rather than jumping in immediately. I think there's just this human nature quality that we have to jump in and fix everything, or we have to come up with a solution, even if it's unsolicited. Now, another example that might resonate with you. I was having another conversation with a friend today. I haven't spoken to this friend in probably a couple of years. And the conversation started off with, well, tell me about you. How are you doing? What's new in your life? What are you doing? Work, all of that. And I started to share. Now, I don't want to say I made the mistake of sharing, because now this is just a mindset framework that, we can get caught up in, where we're kind of in this little spiral, a negative spiral. The person opened up the conversation with me, and I started to share, well, I'm not really doing speech therapy anymore. I burned out 5 years ago, and now I'm a life coach and I work with, other women. Oh, well, you should have gone into working with adults, and then went on for 10 minutes telling me what I should have done. And in that moment, this is another word that you'll often hear me using with my clients. I pivoted. Pivot. So I often talk about Pac-Man with my clients. Now, my dog is here. With my clients, that Pac-Man from the 80s, if you're an 80s person like me, this will resonate with you. You'd see Pac-Man walking down, right? And then Pac-Man would turn because it was a ghost, and then turn this way and turn this way. But if Pac-Man went into the ghost, Pac-Man was eaten. Right? So I often tell my clients to think like Pac-Man, especially if they're from the 80s. Think like Pac-Man and pivot and pivot and pivot. So I chose to pivot when I was on this call with this person today. And instead of getting defensive and getting into an ego war, that's a whole other topic. Let's talk about ego wars next time. I just chose to say, yeah, this is not the person that I really wish to share this with anymore. So I turned it and said, oh, so tell me about you. What's going on with you? And then for the next 45 minutes, this person talked about themselves. I knew what I was getting into, or maybe I didn't know how much I was getting into this conversation, but I wasn't going to allow it to make me feel defeated, make me feel unheard, or mute me because I had something to say. Obviously, this person was not in a place that they could hear me, and they just felt like they needed to respond and offer me advice, even though I wasn't asking for it. The irony is this other person was a speech pathologist as well. So yeah, let's get back to that. People listen to respond. How many times have you been in a conversation and you're sharing something and you just feel like the other person is totally checked out because they're thinking about the next thing they're going to say to you? Or maybe they're just taking it in a whole different direction than what you decided that you wanted to talk about. Let's talk about one-upping someone. Somebody starts talking. I've seen this so many times that somebody shares, oh, I went to such and such a place. Oh, I went to Italy on vacation. and they've had an amazing vacation and they've had all these experiences. And the other person just starts talking about their vacation to Greece and then this place and then that place. Yeah, people listen to respond. How many times have how many times has someone asked you, how are you? And you think, okay, this person's asking me, how am I? So I should tell them. And meanwhile, they really don't give a crap how you're doing. It's just an opening so that they can start talking about themselves and everything that's going on in their lives. Maybe in their lives they're unseen, unheard, and muted, but that's not our problem. What I'm here to talk about today is how do we communicate so that we are heard and understood? And how can we become better listeners for others so that they feel seen and heard and understood? Social media, distractions are such a big part of how that affects our abilities to stay present in a conversation. You could be talking to somebody on the phone, and I am guilty of this with my mother, my poor mom, because I sometimes get distracted on my phone. We're on the phone, she's on speaker, but I'm multitasking, and she'll say, hey, are you listening? You're distracted. And she can pick up on it. We laugh, and then I say, I'll call you back. Let me just finish this thing and I'll call you back. And then we all end up having a good conversation. But, phones, social media, that really affects our ability to stay present in conversations. How many of you have had conversations with people and they're scrolling through social media? Whether it's over the phone and you hear the ding from Facebook, or you're out to eat and you're sharing something and they're like, oh, look at this, check this out. Then that's happened to me plenty, where I've been out to eat with someone and thinking, wow, this is a nice time away with this person. And I'm talking, we're sharing, and they get on their phone and they're showing me random pictures of someone else. Don't tell me that has never happened to you, right? Social media really has affected us. And it's our responsibility to say, we need to come back to the basics of actually having conversations before we had any of these distractions, right? Because it's about human connection. It's about understanding, when you get to have that deep communication and that reciprocal communication. Now, it's not just one-sided where I talk all about myself. I've had that before too. Let me talk all about myself. We'll have to catch up soon. It was so good to catch up. Thank you. And I didn't say a damn ass thing, but you did. And so reciprocal, where it's like, taking turns. As a speech therapist working with children, that was one of the things that we always worked on, just even during play, is learning how to take turns. Because when you can do it through play, then it ripples over into communication and social language. I did mention ego wars, right? And that's going to be a whole, talking about the ego. It's something that I've learned deeply about in the past 5 years, and really to learn what my ego is saying and how egos really affect relationships. But when we talk about the ego and listening, many people listen only to prepare their response, show that they're right, or appear knowledgeable. And it's destructive. It's destructive in relationships, and definitely lowers self-esteem. It lowers your self-worth. We really shouldn't define our self-worth by how others are listening to us. But when you have a close person in your life and you're trying to share something with them and it's going unheard and unseen and misunderstood, that can definitely affect how you're feeling about yourself, that maybe I'm not important enough. Maybe what I have to say is really not that important. Oh yeah, what they went through was way worse than me. So yeah, you know what? That's right. They're right in the way that they approach this conversation. I only say those examples because that's what I did. I allowed the dynamics of conversations, me speaking my truth with other people, and their reactions or their lack of response or their inability to communicate effectively with me, I allowed that to diminish my self-worth. And I went through a period of time where I felt like such shit about myself. Now I can say I've moved through that, and the relationships that I have in my life, they are reciprocal. Every once in a while, there's one that creeps up, like the one I just talked to you about at the gym. And I'm able to just be the observer of that and say, wow, this is interesting. And I'm also more present in my conversations. Like I said, even being a communication specialist for the past 20 years, I had a horrible communication for the longest. I would give people silent treatment. It was a learned behavior. I often said, oh, yes, communication is very important to me. Yet I was quick to get angry. I was quick to judge. So it's a process. It's a process, but it's also, I always tell my clients as well, it's about being aware. Awareness is the first step. And when you're aware, you can have those dynamics. Not everything is going to be perfect in our lives, but you can have those dynamics where you're just like, yeah, if I keep going with this, I'm going to be in an ego war. I'm not interested in that. So I'm aware that this is what the nature of the conversation is. I'm not going to share anything. Thank you. Have a good day. And in contrast, you'll have a conversation with another person. You're just like, wow, this was the most amazing conversation. Like, it was back and forth. We shared. It felt like, we've known each other for years. And I've had that. So I tend to focus on that more than the other version of what I just described. Why does true listening matter? It improves relationships, right? It helps build trust and deepens connections. I have a really good friend, Diana. This is a shout out to you, and check out her channel, Daijo Math. We have an amazing relationship. And sometimes we're on calls and we're bouncing ideas back and forth. And we joke that one of us took the mic and is I might call her for a certain reason, and then Diana's talking about something in her life, and then I take it back, and then she takes it back, and we're aware of it because we say it to each other, like, well, I don't mean to bring it back to me, but the examples that we give each other are helpful in the conversation that we're having, and that has deepened our connection. It has helped to build trust. It leads to better understanding and empathy. You learn other people's perspectives. We're not always right. Yeah, we're not always right. And I was one of those people that used to think, well, I'm educated and I'm a communication specialist. Of course my perspective is right. No, that was a rude awakening. It's helpful to be the observer, whether you agree or not, and just see another person's perspectives. That has helped me to even just stay out of, in this current political climate, to stay out of conversations that just a few years ago I would have gotten so caught up in, so angry, so riled up, and I would have been polarized, and that would have just, created such hate and animosity. Yeah, a freaking conversation can do that. And it doesn't do that to me anymore. It just helps me to understand myself in the dynamic of the conversation, helps me to understand others, helps me to have empathy. At times I'm able to say, wow, I feel sorry for this person that they're in this place, that this is what they have to say to me. So yeah, better understanding and empathy, and you just learn more about the other person's perspectives. It's okay, to learn that. Another thing that true listening develops within us is it enhances personal growth. It can teach you new ideas. It can, give you insights. When you are just the listener for somebody and you're just providing them with that feedback of, yeah, oh, wow, amazing. Asking more questions so that they share more details. You also grow from that experience. Now, another thing that listening does is it reduces misunderstandings and conflicts. I've definitely had those dynamics where I just end up, I'm talking about something or something that's come to the surface, And I just flare up because, like, you're not even listening to me. You're not even listening to me. It's it could definitely trigger an argument, create a misunderstanding, create a narrative where, you know what, this person's not safe for me to talk to. This person, I cannot trust this person. And I was in one of those dynamics for a while. I just was like, what's the point in me saying anything? Because they're going to just try and relate it back to them and share their stories. Meanwhile, it has nothing to do with them. So understanding why true listening matters is important to us. This is so that you can actually improve your communication and also remove some of those triggers around that, that communication that's not the most optimum, right? For, or, that's letting you leave that conversation where you're like, wow, I felt good in that conversation. Yeah, we have those too. So let's talk about how to become a better listener. And we talk about active listening, right? Give your full attention to the person. How hard is it to just put away distractions? If I'm talking to my mom, how hard is it to just focus on her rather than do multitasking? Give your full attention. Now, whether you're in person, whether you're over the phone, whether you're on a Zoom, give your full attention. And use your body language to show engagement. You can nod. You can make eye contact. A lot of times I've learned to just paraphrase what the other person is saying just to confirm understanding. Or if I don't understand what the person's saying, I'll say, what do you mean? Can you explain that again? Now, for anybody who's into astrology, another shout out to Big E Astrology. Follow him on his YouTube channel. I am a double Gemini. That allows me to be very distracted. I multitask. I function by multitasking. And so sometimes I'm having a conversation with somebody and I go off into happy place. And that might be the happy place of what do I have to do tomorrow, or might even be a happy place of like, ooh, what should I wear tomorrow? Yeah, that's kind of something that I'm working on still. But when I find that I've missed something that the other person has said and it's important, I often say, could you say that again? Could you tell me what you just said? Or if I catch the tail end of it, I might say, wait, what do you mean about the grocery store? Tell me that again. Just to give that other person some validation that, yeah, I am listening. And that's also a nice little trigger for yourself to reset and freaking pay attention. And I say that to you because I need to say that to myself. As a person is talking to you, pause before responding. Try as best as you can when the other person is talking to just not think about anything else. Just to purely listen to what the person has to say instead of immediately reacting. Unless the person is specifically coming to you to say, I need help with this. Can you help me with this? You're a listener. We know what it feels like when we're trying to say something and somebody's giving us unsolicited advice. Did I really need to hear from this other friend this morning that what field, as I'm talking about going into life coaching, that what else I should have been doing in my life? Meanwhile, we haven't spoken in 2 years. No, I wouldn't do that to someone else. So take a moment to process what the other person is saying. Don't react. And the biggest thing is, don't one up with the story. Don't one up with somebody. Somebody talks about their vacation to Florida. You don't have to one up with them with your European vacation. You might have had this year-long world tour and somebody's calling you to tell you about their 3-day weekend away. Listen. And when the time comes, you'll have your chance. And believe me, you'll have your chance. You just have to allow for this in the dynamic. Ask open-ended questions. when you're having a conversation with someone, encourage the person that you're speaking to share more instead of jumping in with your own thoughts. I often say that now. I'm like, well, what do you mean? I might know what the other person is talking about, but I might say, well, what do you mean? When you ask open questions like that, you're also protecting yourself from telling that other person how they should feel. How many times have you heard that from somebody when you're sharing something, especially something emotional or something vulnerable, and somebody's like, well, you should feel like this. Well, you should do this. You shouldn't shit on yourself, and nobody else should be shitting on you either. So wait. I mean, if there's anything that you can get from this video on communication and listening, is waiting. A lot of times in my sessions with clients, I use a process called digging and discovering. It's when they talk, I say absolutely nothing. And sometimes that dig and discover process can be about 20 minutes. And that person is dumping their subconscious. And that's where I get to find all the magic of where we can go in our sessions. If I'm interrupting them, or already starting to say, well, you should do this and you should have done that, and stop thinking like that. You're setting up a trajectory where nobody's going to succeed. You don't want win-lose communication. You want win-win communication. Here's one that you might resonate with and that I think a lot of us have issue with. Be comfortable with silence. Allow pauses in the conversation, and they often lead to deeper insights. Silence is okay. I think as a society where we're very verbal and very opinionated, we often can't handle the silence. So we have to fill that silence with something. And that silence, sometimes filling that silence, can create bigger misunderstandings and bigger conflicts. Silence is okay. Last thing, check your ego at the door. We'll talk more about ego in another video. What is the ego? Remind yourself that in this communication, that the goal is to understand. It's not to win. It's not to prove anything. Now, if you find yourself in an ego war with someone, like the person I described to you at the gym, where I thought, oh, here's an opening, let me share about myself, and it was hijacked, went right back to that other person. I had a choice in that moment. I can keep pushing and get into an ego war with them, or I could just be the observer, say, I see what's happening here, I'm going to pull out. I chose the latter, and that saved me a lot of stress, anguish, and spiraling thoughts that it could have gone that way. So, I encourage you to try one specific listening skill this week. Pausing before responding, using validating sounds and words. Oh, wow. Yeah, great. Paraphrasing what the other person's saying. Try it this week, and I want you to share in the comments below what worked, what didn't work. And if there was something that worked for you that I didn't share today, I want you to tell me in the comments. Because if we can improve our communication, it just opens up a world of possibilities for human interaction and dynamics, and creating more peace in this world rather than the disharmony that exists right now. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's truly about understanding the person behind them. Think about that. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about truly understanding the person behind them. So the next time you're in a conversation this week, look at the person who's saying these words. Try to get them Try to get to know them a little bit better, whether it's a personal relationship, someone at work, someone at the gym, someone at the grocery store, anything, strangers. And then I would love to end this episode with a quote from Stephen Covey. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. So I ask you this. You think you're a good listener?